I heard about the Manchester synagogue attack, my first instinct, obviously, was to blame the hooligans who took part in those Unite the Kingdom marches a few weeks ago because, well, you know, who else? So you can imagine my complete surprise when I found out the attacker wasn't Nigel with a pint glass, but a Syrian man whose first name is Jihad. Sometimes life really does completely blindside you. British media reported that a 35-year-old British citizen of Syrian descent, Jihad al-Shami, had ploughed his car into Jews standing outside a Manchester synagogue. Jihad then proceeded to stab Jews, killing 2, before police processed his martyrdom application with bullets. Just on the terrorist's description, a British citizen of Syrian descent named Jihad al-Shami. Jihad is a traditional Arabic name meaning struggle and is now associated with violent Islamic extremism. Al-Shami, well, that means from Syria. So a terrorist granted British citizenship in 2006 is literally named Jihad from Syria. You'd think that might have been a red flag on the citizenship application, but apparently authorities looked at a guy named Holy War from Syria and nodded approvingly. After all, diversity is our strength. What could possibly go wrong? It's a never-ending source of wonder to me that we in the West import trouble, the clue was in the name, and then spend all our time wondering why we have trouble. Britain literally naturalised a man called Jihad from Syria and now stare in stunned disbelief after Jihad from Syria committed jihad in Britain. Politicians stroke their chins and wonder, how is it that Manchester now looks like Damascus, but with drizzle? It's a mystery even Agatha Christie would struggle to solve. You know, when those peace-loving protesters march through Sydney and Melbourne every weekend chanting, "Globalise the Intifada," well, this is what a globalised Intifada looks like. It looks like Jihad from Syria stabbing Jews to death on their most holy day outside their place of worship in Manchester after he was generously provided with British citizenship. While the bodies were still warm, political leaders were performing the routine they know so well. It's not like they haven't had plenty of practice. We stand in solidarity. We will not tolerate hatred. It was moving the first time, but after 20 years of Islamist attacks on Western soil, it's now about as moving as a voicemail reminder from your dentist. Anthony Albanese, well, he tweeted a tweet, quote, "I send my condolences to the people of Manchester after the heinous attack on a synagogue on the most sacred day on the Jewish calendar. There is no place for terrorism, and all Australians stand with the UK at this dreadful time." Right, condolences. I'm sure the dead are comforted, and I'm sure Australian Jews feel a lot safer. I particularly love how he writes, "There is no place for terrorism." Does he feel the need to say that because he's well aware we've imported plenty of people who feel emboldened to commit acts of terror? Does he imagine jihadists will read his tweet and immediately think, "I hadn't realised there's no place for terrorism here. Take me to one of Jacinta Allen's bins so I can peacefully dispose of my machete"? Or does he insist there's no place for terrorism to try to make us forget that here in Australia and around the Western world, there have been a huge number of Islamist terror attacks, after which we are routinely assured there's no place for terror, as if that's meant to make us believe the latest bloodshed is just one of those random things that happens from time to time. You know, like Sydney trains running on time. There's no place for terrorism. Sure, apart from in Manchester, Paris, Sydney, New York, London, Berlin, Brussels, or anywhere else where Westerners live. No place for terrorism except all the places where terrorism keeps happening. But we're supposed to play this game every single time, pretending it's an anomaly, like a budget surplus. I'm sure Jihad from Syria is reading Elbow's tweet from the afterlife and rethinking his life choices. UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer, well, he addressed his subjects.
Earlier today, on Yom Kippur, the holiest day for the Jewish community, a vile individual committed a terrorist attack that attacked Jews because they are Jews, and attacked Britain because of our values.
Well, of course the terrorists attack Jews because they are Jews. Now, whatever might be said in the coming days, this attack was not about Gaza. There's a peace deal for Gaza awaiting the Palestinian signature. As for it being an attack on British values, Well, some would argue that rather than an attack on British values, it was an attack enabled by modern British values, which seemed to involve rolling out the welcome mat for anyone with a suitcase and a grievance, and then acting surprised when the grievance is unpacked with a knife. If you're not yet convinced the West has huge problems, consider the behaviour in the immediate aftermath of this latest attack. While the Jewish corpses were still warm, there was a pro-Palestinian rally outside Parliament in London. Before the body bags had been removed, there was a pro-Palestinian rally in Liverpool. The blood hadn't been cleaned from the synagogue steps, and there was a pro-Palestinian rally in Edinburgh. Remember, all of these rallies were happening in the immediate aftermath of the terrorist attack. Sharks smelling blood never waste a tide. Even in Manchester, just a few hours after Jihad from Syria had gone on his bloody rampage in that very city, the sound of Jewish tears was well and truly drowned out by chants of "Free, free Palestine." You have to ask the question, who gave them the idea that this is somehow justified? Who gave them the impression that they're privileged people in a foreign land? Pro-Palestinians will, of course, argue that these demonstrations were prearranged, and maybe they were. But not one organiser thought, 2 Jews were murdered this morning. Maybe we can postpone the hate fest until Tuesday? You have to ask yourself why that wouldn't occur to them. These are not anti-war protests anymore. They're expressions of violence and anarchy. It should be a national emergency when people respond to a terror attack by parading in support of the terrorists, and this is happening all over the West. But anyone who speaks out about it risks being arrested or jailed. Just on that, I think it's time we stopped calling these gatherings protests and started calling them for what they are. They're demonstrations, and they're demonstrating to all and sundry that they have the protection of Western governments to chant their hatred and to intimidate the Jewish community with impunity. Meanwhile, Keir Starmer was stammering on.
That this is a country that stands up to hatred, and that we don't just provide refuge, we provide a home.
Seriously, when Starmer says Britain is a country that stands up to hatred, he means hurty tweets about immigration posted on Facebook. Use social media to criticise mass immigration and you're likely to get a knock on the door in the middle of the night. Chant "Globalise the Intifada" in the streets just hours after Jews have been stabbed to death by a guy who actually globatised the Intifada, and, well, you'll get a police escort. Now, before we get back to Keir Starmer, let's check in with Australian Greens Deputy Leader Mehreen Faruqi.
Any violence against citizens anywhere should be condemned, and I wholeheartedly condemn it. There is no room for any racism, any anti-Semitism, any Islamophobia anywhere in the world, and the perpetrators should be held to account.
You have to love the Greens, don't you? Jews get stabbed to death by an Islamist, and she's immediately warning about Islamophobia. And we wonder why our countries have become so dangerous. Meanwhile, Keir Starmer, bless his hallmark greeting card heart, was carrying on.
On behalf of the nation, I want to offer my condolences to the families and victims affected. And so, on behalf of our country, I express my solidarity, but also my sadness that you still have to live with these fears. Nobody should have to do that. Nobody.
Spare me. I express my solidarity. I'm sorry, but what does that even mean? Solidarity doesn't stop Islamists, and solidarity doesn't revive Jewish corpses. Here's the thing that makes me really ticked. The PM speaks as though there's nothing he can do other than narrate the tragedy. Nobody should have to live with these fears. Nobody. Cool story, Sir Keir. But they do. They do live with these fears. You're not a grief counsellor. You're a leader, or at least you're supposed to be. And it's your job to do something about it. We don't elect our leaders to read eulogies. We elect our leaders to stop funerals. But Keir Starmer wasn't done with his dribble.
I promise you that over the coming days, you will see the other Britain, the Britain of compassion, of decency, of love. And I promise you that this Britain will come together to wrap our arms around your community and show you that Britain is a place where you and your family are safe, secure, and belong.
Now that really is great, if only Keir Starmer wrapping his arms around you provided protection from jihadists. You know the really obscene thing about Keir Starmer and leaders like him? They'll acknowledge a Palestinian state on the other side of the world, but won't acknowledge a jihad occurring in their own cities. Keir Starmer, like Albanese, says he wants to keep Jews safe. What a joke. His idea of keeping Jews safe is arresting them if they're too visibly Jewish.
You are quite openly Jewish. This is a pro-Palestinian march. I'm not accusing you of anything, but I'm worried about the reaction to you. You've been escorted out of this area so you can go about your business, go where you like freely, or if you choose to remain here, because you are causing a breach of peace with other people, you'll be arrested.
If I remain here, you will arrest me.
Because your presence is antagonising a large group of people and we can't deal with all of them.
Now, the truth is brutal, but you've got to admit it's staring us in the face. The West has spent 20 years pretending Islamist terror is an occasional anomaly instead of the inevitable outcome of policies that import jihad from Syria and then act surprised when jihad from Syria behaves like, well, jihad from Syria. But here's the real outrage. You're more likely to get in trouble for saying what I just said than you are for marching through the CBD chanting, "Globalise the Intifada."